The beach house was about 40 minutes outside of Destin, far enough from the strip that you couldn't hear the crowds, but close enough that I didn't feel completely isolated. I'd rented it for the week because I needed to finish my thesis and my roommates were throwing parties every night back at school. The place was cheap because it was technically off-season mid-March before the real spring break rush hit. Just me, my laptop, and a view of the Gulf. I teach part-time at a community college while finishing my master's, so my schedule's flexible. I drove down on a Sunday afternoon, stopped at a Publix for groceries, and got to the house around 6. It was a small one-story place, pale blue siding, built up on stilts like most coastal houses. The driveway was crushed shell and gravel, maybe 50 feet long, leading from the main road. There were 2 other houses on the street, both dark, probably vacation rentals that hadn't been booked yet. I unloaded my car, set up my laptop on the kitchen table, and made dinner. The sun was setting, and I remember thinking how quiet it was. No traffic, no music, just the distant sound of waves and the occasional bird. I worked for a few hours, then went to bed around 11. The kind of normal, boring evening I'd been hoping for. Monday morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and sat at the table to work. The kitchen window faced the driveway, and I'd left the blinds open to let in the light. Around 9, I glanced up and saw someone standing at the end of the driveway, right where it met the road. A man, I think, wearing a dark jacket and jeans. He was just standing there facing the house, not moving. I figured he was a neighbor, maybe someone out for a walk, who'd stopped to check his phone. I went back to my work. When I looked up again, maybe 10 minutes later, he was gone. I didn't think much of it. I worked through lunch, took a break around 2 to walk down to the beach. The water was too cold to swim, but I walked along the shore for maybe half an hour, then came back. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed footprints in the gravel near the house, like someone had walked up close to the front door. They weren't mine. I'd gone out the back way to the beach. But it was a rental house. Could have been the owner or maintenance or someone who had the wrong address. That night I made pasta and worked until around 10. I got up to refill my water and glanced out the kitchen window. The driveway was lit by a single floodlight mounted on the side of the house, and standing at the end of the driveway in almost the exact same spot as that morning was the same figure. Dark jacket, hands at his sides, facing the house. My gut told me something was off. I turned off the kitchen light so he couldn't see me and watched. He didn't move, just stood there. I waited maybe 5 minutes, then went to the living room window to get a different angle. From there, I could see his profile. He looked youngish, maybe late 20s, clean-shaven. His expression was blank. He wasn't looking at his phone, wasn't smoking a cigarette, wasn't doing anything. Just standing. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? Someone standing on a public road near my driveway? That's not illegal. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe he was waiting for someone. I talked myself out of it and went to bed, but I locked all the doors first. Tuesday morning, same thing. I woke up, made coffee, sat down to work, and around 8:30 I looked up and he was there again. Same spot, same posture. I watched him for a while, and he didn't move. I grabbed my phone and almost called 911, but then I thought, what if this is just some guy who lives on this street and I'm the one being weird? What if he's harmless and I'm overreacting? I decided to go outside and ask if he needed help. I opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. The second I did, he turned and walked away, not quickly, just a normal pace, heading down the road toward the main highway. I watched until he was out of sight. I went back inside and tried to work, but I couldn't focus. Every time I looked out the window, I expected to see him again. Around noon, I drove into town, each partly to get out of the house and partly to see if I could spot him. I didn't. I grabbed lunch at a diner and came back around 2. When I pulled into the driveway, he was standing on the porch. Not at the end of the driveway this time. On the porch, maybe 6 feet from the front door, facing it like he'd been about to knock. He turned when he heard my car, and we made eye contact. He didn't say anything. Didn't wave, didn't smile, didn't look startled. Just stared at me. I stayed in the car. My hands were shaking. I had my phone in my lap and I thought, okay, now I'm calling the police. This is trespassing. This is real. But before I could unlock my phone, he stepped off the porch and walked past my car, down the driveway and onto the road. Same slow, deliberate pace. He didn't look back. The guy sat there for maybe 10 minutes before I got out of the car. I checked the front door. It was still locked. No damage, no sign he'd tried to get in. I went inside and locked everything, closed all the blinds, and tried to calm down. I told myself I'd call the police if he came back. I told myself I should have called them already. That night I didn't see him, but I barely slept. Every sound made me jump. I kept getting up to check the windows, pulling the blinds back just enough to see the driveway. It was empty. Wednesday morning, I decided to leave. I started packing my stuff. And while I was loading the car, I looked down the driveway and he was there again, standing at the end, watching me. I got in the car, locked the doors, and backed out fast, kicking up gravel. He didn't move as I passed him. I looked in the rear view mirror, and he was still standing there facing the house, like I'd never left. I drove straight home, didn't stop except for gas. I called the rental company and told them I had a family emergency. They refunded half the week. I still don't know who he was or what he wanted. I never called the police, which I regret now. I think about it a lot. What would have happened if I'd stayed another night? Or if I'd confronted him that first morning instead of talking myself out of it? My gut was screaming at me the whole time, and I kept ignoring it. Sometimes I checked the street view of that house on Google Maps, just to see if anyone's standing in the driveway. I know that's irrational, but I do it anyway. I picked up the spring break shift at Coastline Adventure Park because the pay was double and I needed it. The park stays open late during break week, sometimes until midnight, and they needed extra security to handle the college crowds. I'd worked there summers before, so I knew the layout pretty well. It's not a huge park, maybe 20 rides and a midway, but it sprawls out over 40 acres with a lot of dead zones between attractions. My shift was 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. I'd patrol the perimeter, check the employee areas, make sure nobody was sneaking alcohol in or trying to sleep in the picnic pavilions. The first 3 nights were normal. Drunk college kids, a few arguments, one medical call for a kid who ate too much funnel cake and rode the cyclone. Standard stuff. On the 4th night, I found the first schedule when I was doing my usual loop, starting at the north gate and working clockwise. Around 9 p.m., I cut through the employee break area behind the funnel cake stand to check the back fence. There's a picnic table there where staff smoke on breaks. Sitting on the table, weighted down with a rock, was a piece of paper. It was my schedule. Not the official park schedule, my personal route. The exact order I walked my patrol with times. North Gate 9 p.m., Employee Area 9:15 p.m., Pavilion 3 9:30 p.m. It went on like that for my entire shift, down to the minute. I picked it up. It was printed on regular printer paper, the kind you'd get at any office supply store. No handwriting, just a basic font. I looked around, but the area was empty. The midway music was loud enough that I could barely hear myself think. I figured maybe it was a prank from one of the other guards. We'd joke around sometimes. I folded it up and stuck it in my pocket. But it bothered me. My route wasn't official. I'd developed it myself over the nights, just a pattern that made sense to me. I'd never written it down. I kept going. Did my check of Pavilion 3, then looped past the Tilt-A-Whirl. Around 10 p.m., I was supposed to check the back storage area near the log flume. It's this narrow space between the ride and the fence, full of old equipment and spare parts. I don't like going back there even in daylight. At night, it's just a tunnel of shadows. I almost didn't go. My gut was telling me to skip it, just radio in that it was clear. But that felt stupid. It was my job. I went in, clicked on my flashlight, and swept it across the stacked crates and tarps. Everything looked normal. Then I saw the second schedule. It was taped to a crate at eye level, right where I'd have to see it. Same paper, same font. But this one started at 10:15 p.m. The next stop on my route, Ferris wheel operator booth, 10:15 p.m. South restrooms, 10:30 p.m. Main gate, 10:45 p.m. I ripped it down. My hands were shaking a little. I radioed the other guard on duty, Marcus, and asked if he'd been messing with me. He said no, sounded confused. I told him to keep an eye out for anyone in employee areas who shouldn't be there. I thought about calling the police. But what would I say? Someone left me a piece of paper? They'd think I was wasting their time. It wasn't a threat, it was just weird. I kept going, but I started changing my route. I skipped the Ferris wheel booth and went straight to the south restrooms. I figured if someone was predicting my movements, I'd throw them off. The restrooms were empty. I checked every stall, looked behind the building. Nothing. I was starting to feel paranoid, like maybe I was overreacting. Spring break crowds do weird stuff. Maybe some college kid thought it was funny. But then I went to the main gate at 11 p.m., an hour ahead of schedule, and there was another one. This time, it was tucked under the gate's keypad, the one only staff can access. I had to lift the cover to see it. It said, "Main gate 11 p.m. You're early." That's when the fear really set in. Whoever this was, they weren't just following me. They were anticipating me. They knew I'd change my route. They'd adjusted. I called Marcus again, told him I was finding notes and I wanted to sweep the park together. He met me at the main gate, and we spent the next hour going through every employee area, every back path. We didn't find anyone. The park was full of people. But they were all guests, all accounted for in the public areas. Marcus thought maybe it was a former employee, someone who still had a key or knew the park layout. He suggested we report it to management in the morning. I agreed, but I didn't want to wait until morning. Every instinct told me to leave, clock out early, let someone else handle it. But I didn't. I stayed. Around midnight, the crowd started thinning. By 12:30, the park was nearly empty, just a few stragglers heading to the exits. I was supposed to do a final sweep of the pavilions before the park closed at 1 a.m. I found the fourth schedule at Pavilion 1. It was sitting on the bench where I usually sit to fill out my end-of-shift report. The paper was damp from the night air. It just said, Pavilion 1, 12:45 a.m., last stop. I didn't sit down. I stood there staring at it, and that's when I heard the footsteps. Someone was walking on the gravel path behind the pavilion, slow and steady. I turned and saw a figure standing about 20 feet away, just outside the glow of the pavilion lights. Average height, wearing a dark hoodie. I couldn't see their face. I called out, asked if they needed help. They didn't answer. Just stood there. I radioed Marcus, told him to get to Pavilion 1. My voice cracked a little. The figure still didn't move. I couldn't tell if they were looking at me or past me. The air felt wrong, too still. The midway music had stopped. The park was silent. Marcus showed up 2 minutes later, jogging across the grass. By the time he got there, the figure was gone. We searched the area, checked the exits, reviewed the security camera footage from the main gate. Nothing. No one matching that description had left the park. Management reviewed everything the next day. They found the schedules I'd collected, checked the employee logs, interviewed staff. No one admitted to it. No one had an explanation. They added extra cameras to the employee areas and told me to report anything else immediately. I finished out the week, but I never worked alone again. Marcus or another guard was always nearby. I didn't find any more schedules, but on my last night, when I was cleaning out my locker, I found a fifth one. It was folded up inside my jacket pocket. It's the jacket I'd left in the employee break room on my first night. It just said, "See you next spring." I quit the next day. I still don't know who it was or how they knew my route before I'd even walked it. I think about it sometimes, especially when spring break rolls around. I wonder if they're still there, leaving schedules for whoever replaced me. I never got answers. I never went back. The Spring Break Music Festival had wrapped up 2 days earlier, and I'd signed up for the volunteer cleanup crew because they were offering a $100 gift card for the outdoor gear store. I needed new hiking boots anyway, and it was only supposed to be 6 hours of work spread across Saturday morning into early afternoon. The festival grounds were about 15 acres of open field just outside Gulf Shores, with a few permanent structures, restrooms, a covered stage area, and a small operations building near the main gate. I got there around 7 in the morning. The coordinator, a woman named Beth, who worked for the county parks department, handed out assignments at the gate. There were maybe 20 of us total, mostly college students trying to pad their community service hours. Beth gave me the northeast section, and which was the farthest from the main stage and hadn't seen as much foot traffic during the festival. She said it would be lighter work, mostly just picking up stray bottles and checking the trash bins. The morning was overcast and humid, the kind of thick Gulf Coast air that makes your shirt stick to your back, even when you're not doing much. I had a rolling cart, a grabber tool, and a stack of black garbage bags. The field was trampled flat in most places, and there were tire ruts from the vendor trucks that had pulled out the night before. It was quiet except for the occasional gull and the distant sound of the other volunteers talking near the stage area. I started at the tree line on the eastern edge, working my way inward in rows. Mostly I found plastic cups, a few beer cans, some food wrappers. Nothing unusual. I'd been at it for maybe 40 minutes when I noticed the first trash bag I'd filled and tied off was gone. I'd left it near a fence post so I could come back and load it onto the cart later, but when I circled back, it wasn't there. I figured maybe one of the other volunteers had grabbed it to consolidate loads, or Beth had sent someone around to collect them early. I kept working. By 9:30, I'd filled 3 more bags and left them in a line near the fence while I moved deeper into my section. When I came back 10 minutes later, 2 of the bags were gone, but the third one, the one I'd tied most recently, was still there. That felt weird, but I didn't think much of it. Maybe whoever was collecting them was just working in a strange order. Around 10, I took a break and walked back toward the operations building to grab some water. I saw a few other volunteers dumping bags into a big roll-off dumpster near the gate, so I asked one of them, a guy in a university hoodie, if he'd been collecting bags from the northeast section. He said no, he'd been working the opposite side of the field the whole time. I asked Beth when I saw her near the restrooms, and she said nobody had been assigned to collect bags yet. We were supposed to bring them to the dumpster ourselves once we'd finished our sections. That's when my gut started telling me something was off. I walked back to my section, and now the third bag I'd left by the fence was gone too. I stood there for a minute, looking around. The field was wide open. I could see the other volunteers in the distance, little dots of color moving around near the stage. Nobody was close to my area. Nobody had any reason to be. But I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe I'd miscounted the bags, or maybe I was misremembering where I'd left them. I decided to just finish my section and haul everything to the dumpster in one trip. I filled 2 more bags over the next half hour, and this time, I kept them right next to me within sight. I didn't leave them anywhere. Around 11, I noticed someone standing near the tree line, maybe 60 yards away from me. It was a man, I think, though I couldn't make out much detail. He was wearing dark clothes, maybe a jacket, which seemed strange given how warm and muggy it was. He was just standing there facing my direction. I waved, figuring maybe he was another volunteer or someone from the county checking on our progress. He didn't wave back. He didn't move at all. I went back to picking up trash. But I kept glancing over at him. He stayed in the same spot for a good 5 minutes. Then he turned and walked back into the trees. I felt this sinking feeling in my chest. The kind you get when you know something's wrong, but you can't put your finger on it. I thought about walking over to see if there was a trail back there or maybe a road, but I didn't. I just kept working. By noon, I'd finished my section and had 6 bags lined up next to my cart. I started loading them on, and that's when I saw him again. He was standing closer this time, maybe 30 yards away, right at the edge of the tree line. Same dark jacket, same completely still posture. He wasn't looking around or doing anything, just standing there facing me. I pulled out my phone to call Beth, but I had no signal. I'd had 2 bars earlier near the gate, but out here in the northeast corner, I had nothing. I thought about just leaving the bags and walking back to find her, but that felt stupid. What was I going to say? Some guy was standing near the trees? He hadn't done anything. He hadn't said anything, for all I knew. He was just a hiker or someone cutting through the property. But every instinct I had was telling me to get out of there. I loaded the last 2 bags onto the cart as fast as I could and started pushing it toward the main gate. The cart's wheels kept catching in the ruts, and I had to stop twice to reposition the bags because they were sliding off. I didn't look back at first, but then I couldn't help it. I turned around and he was following me, not running, not even walking fast, just walking, maybe 20 yards behind me now, keeping the same steady pace. I started moving faster, almost jogging, and the cart tipped over. 2 of the bags split open and trash spilled everywhere. I left it. I just left the whole cart there and started walking as fast as I could toward the gate. I could see the other volunteers in the distance, and I kept my eyes on them, using them like a landmark. I didn't look back again until I reached the operations building. When I finally turned around, he was gone. I scanned the field, the tree line, everywhere. Nothing. One of the other volunteers asked if I was okay because I guess I looked pretty shaken up. I said I was fine, just felt sick from the heat. I told Beth I needed to leave early, and she said that was fine. I'd already done most of my section anyway. I almost called the police from my car, but I talked myself out of it. What would I even say? A guy walked near me in a public field. He didn't threaten me, didn't say a word. I figured I'd just sound paranoid or like I was wasting their time. I regret that now. I drove home and didn't think about it much for the rest of the day. But that night I got an email from Beth thanking all the volunteers. She mentioned that when they did a final sweep of the field on Sunday, they found several trash bags lined up near the fence in the northeast section, right where I'd originally left my first few bags. She said she didn't know who'd collected them, but she appreciated the extra effort. I never went back to ask her about it. I still don't know who that man was, or why he was moving my trash, or why he followed me. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd been out there alone, if there hadn't been other volunteers within shouting distance. I don't like thinking about it. To this day, I have no idea what he wanted. The shuttle route wasn't complicated. I'd been driving it for 3 days straight, ferrying spring breakers between the resort cluster on the south end of the island and the main strip, where all the bars and restaurants were. 12 stops total, running every 45 minutes from noon until 2 in the morning. The company had hired a bunch of us for the week because the regular drivers couldn't handle the volume. I needed the money and the hours were decent, so I didn't mind. The van held 15 passengers, though I rarely had more than 8 or 9 at a time. Most people were drunk or sunburned or both. They'd pile in, ask me which stop was closest to whatever bar they were trying to find, then zone out on their phones until I called it. Easy work. Boring mostly. The route was a loop. So after the first day, I could have done it in my sleep. It was my 4th shift, around 9 at night, when I first noticed him. I'd just pulled away from the resort pickup area with 6 passengers, all college kids in swimsuits and cover-ups, talking loudly about their dinner plans. I was heading towards stop 3, the one near the tiki bar, when I glanced in the rear view and saw him sitting in the back row. Middle-aged guy, maybe late 40s, wearing a plain gray polo and khaki shorts. He wasn't talking to anyone, just sitting there with his hands folded in his lap, staring straight ahead. I didn't think much of it. Plenty of older tourists came down for spring break, usually parents checking in on their kids or couples trying to relive their 20s. He looked normal enough. But when I pulled up to stop 3 and opened the door, he stood up and got off with the group. I watched him walk toward the tiki bar, then lost sight of him in the crowd. 20 minutes later, I was at stop 7, the one by the seafood restaurant. I'd picked up a few more passengers at stops 4 and 5, and when I looked back to count heads, he was there again. Same seat, same posture, same blank expression. I did a double take. I hadn't seen him get on. I'd been watching the door at every stop like I was supposed to, checking for new passengers, and I was sure he hadn't boarded. But there he was. My gut told me something was off, but I pushed it down. Maybe I'd just missed him. It was a busy night. People were moving around a lot, and I was tired. I'd been doing 12-hour shifts all week. I figured I was just zoning out. At stop 9, he got off again. I watched him this time. I made sure I saw him step down onto the curb and walk away. He headed toward the convenience store on the corner and disappeared inside. I pulled away, picked up 2 more passengers at stop 10, then circled back to the resort to start the loop over. When I got to stop 2 on the next round, he was already sitting in the back. I froze. I'd been watching the door the entire time. No one had gotten on. The van had been empty except for one couple sitting up front, and they'd been there since the resort. I stared at him in the rearview mirror and he stared back. Not in a threatening way, just blank. Like he was waiting for something. I almost said something, almost asked him how he'd gotten on, but I didn't. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe he'd gotten on at the resort and I'd just missed him somehow. And maybe I was more exhausted than I thought. I kept driving. He got off at stop 5. I made sure to watch him walk away, made sure I saw him turn the corner and disappear. Then I locked the doors while I drove to the next stop. I don't know why I did that. It felt stupid, but my hands were shaking a little, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. At stop 8, I unlocked the doors to let a group of 4 on. They climbed in, laughing about something, and I waited for them to sit down before I pulled away. I glanced in the rear view mirror to check the aisle, and he was there again. Same seat, same expression. This time I knew I hadn't missed him. I'd been staring at the door the whole time. The 4 passengers had been the only ones to board, and I'd counted them. He hadn't been with them. "Excuse me," I said, loud enough for him to hear. "Sir, did you just get on?" He didn't answer, didn't even blink, just kept staring straight ahead. One of the passengers, a girl in a neon pink tank top, turned around and looked at me. "You talking to someone?" "The guy in the back," I said, pointing. She glanced over her shoulder, then back at me. "There's no one back there." I looked in the mirror again. He was still there. I could see him as clearly as I could see her, but she was staring at the empty seat like I was crazy. "Never mind," I said. My voice sounded weird, too high. "Sorry." I kept driving. My hands were locked on the wheel, and I couldn't stop checking the mirror. He didn't move. Didn't look at me, just sat there. At stop 10, he got off. I watched him step down. Watched him walk toward the beach access path. I watched him disappear into the dark. Then I sat there for a full minute with the doors open, trying to decide what to do. I thought about calling my supervisor, but what would I even say? That I kept seeing a passenger who wasn't there? That no one else could see him? I'd sound insane. I thought about calling the police, but I talked myself out of it. What were they going to do? I didn't have any proof. He hadn't threatened me, hadn't done anything. He was just there. And then not there. I figured I'd finish the shift, go home, get some sleep, and it would all make sense in the morning. But when I got back to the resort to start the next loop, he was already in the van, sitting in the same seat, waiting. I didn't finish the shift. I told the dispatcher I was sick, parked the van at the depot, and went home. I didn't go back the next day. I called in and quit over the phone, told them I had a family emergency. They didn't push it. They had plenty of other drivers. I still don't know who he was or how he kept getting on. I've thought about it a lot, tried to come up with explanations that make sense, but none of them do. Maybe I was hallucinating from exhaustion. Maybe it was some kind of stress thing. But I know what I saw. And I know that the girl couldn't see him. I didn't tell anyone about it until now. I figured no one would believe me. Hell, I'm not sure I believe me. But I still think about him sometimes, sitting in that back row, staring at nothing. I still wonder where he got off to that last time. and whether he's still riding that road, waiting for someone else to notice him. I never went back to that island. I don't think I ever will. The canal towpath runs about 12 miles through the county, mostly flat, popular with families during spring break, when the weather's decent. I'd taken the job at the bike rental kiosk because it was outdoors, paid $15 an hour, and I could study between customers. The kiosk sits at the trailhead where the towpath meets the old mill parking lot, about 20 minutes outside town. It's a wooden shed, basically, painted green, with racks for 30 bikes and a fold-down counter. Spring break week had been busier than I expected. Families mostly, some college kids looking to burn off hangovers. I worked the early shift, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., which meant I got there before sunrise to unlock everything and check the bikes. The company had a simple system. Customers filled out a paper form, left an ID, took a bike. When they returned it, I checked it back in, crossed their name off, gave back their ID basic. It was Wednesday, 4th day of the week. I'd gotten into a rhythm. Unlock the kiosk, turn on the small space heater, check the bikes for flat tires or chain issues, make coffee in the little electric kettle I'd brought from home. The mornings were still cold, maybe 40 degrees, and fog came off the canal heavy enough that I couldn't see the opposite bank. I was going through the rental log around 7:30 when I noticed something off. Bike number 14 was checked in, returned at 7:15 a.m., according to the timestamp I'd written. But I didn't remember anyone returning a bike that morning. I'd only arrived at 6, and I would have noticed someone riding up in the dark. I went outside to check the rack. Bike 14 was there, locked in its spot. On the seat was dry, but the tires were wet, little bits of gravel stuck in the treads. Someone had ridden it recently. My gut told me something was wrong, but I talked myself down. Maybe I'd spaced out, been in the back of the kiosk, making coffee when they returned it. It was early, I was tired, I let it go. Around 9, I rented out 6 bikes to a family. They took numbers 3, 5, 8, 12, 19, and 22. I wrote it all down, took their IDs, watched them pedal off toward the north section of the trail. The mom had asked how long the loop was, and I'd told her the full circuit was about 8 miles if they crossed at the pedestrian bridge and came back on the opposite side. I went back to studying. I had a chemistry exam the following week, and I was behind. And the kiosk was quiet, except for the occasional dog walker or jogger passing by. The fog had burned off a little, but it still hung low over the water, thick and gray. At 10:20, I heard the rattle of a bike being returned. I looked up and saw bike number 8, locked back in its rack. But no one was there. I stepped outside, looked around. The parking lot was empty except for my car and 2 others that had been there since I arrived. The towpath stretched in both directions, flat and visible for at least a quarter mile. No one. I checked the bike. The seat was warm, the handlebars were damp, like someone had been gripping them with sweaty hands. The front tire had fresh mud on it, still wet. I stood there for a long time, just staring at it. My heart was beating faster than it should have been. I thought about calling my supervisor, but what would I even say? Someone returned a bike and I didn't see them? It sounded stupid. I went back inside and wrote down the return time. I told myself, maybe the family had split up, maybe one of the kids rode back quickly, and I just missed them in the 2 minutes I'd been in the back corner of the kiosk, charging my phone. It was possible, but I didn't believe it. At 11:05, bike number 12 came back Same thing. I heard the faint metallic click of it being locked into the rack, looked up, saw nothing. I ran outside this time, faster, and checked the tow path in both directions. Empty. The canal was still, the fog denser now, rolling in from the east. I could hear a bird somewhere, maybe a heron, but no voices, no footsteps, nothing. The bike was wet. The seat, the frame, the grips, like someone had just ridden it through the fog. I pulled out my phone to call the police, but I stopped. What was I reporting? Bikes being returned? I'd sound insane. I thought about locking up early and leaving, but I needed the money and my shift didn't end until 2. I told myself I'd wait it out. 4 more hours. I kept the kiosk door open after that, sat where I could see the racks. I didn't look at my textbook. I just watched. At 11:50, bike number 3 came back. I saw it happen this time. The bike rolled into the rack on its own, like someone had given it a push, and the lock clicked into place. But there was no one. I was staring right at it, and I saw no hands, no person, nothing. The bike just locked itself in. I felt cold all over, the kind of cold that doesn't come from the weather. Every instinct told me to get in my car and leave. But I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at the rack. Then I noticed something I hadn't before. The rental log. I flipped back through the pages, checking the names. The family had rented 6 bikes at 9 a.m. But according to the log, those same 6 bikes had been rented the day before, Tuesday, at 9 a.m. Same numbers, same time, different names. I went back further. Monday, same 6 bikes, 9 a.m. Sunday, same. Someone had been renting the exact same bikes at the exact same time every single day. But the names were different. The handwriting was different. I checked the IDs I'd taken that morning, the ones from the family. They were still sitting in the plastic tray under the counter. I hadn't given them back yet, but if the bikes were being returned, where were the people? At 12:30, bike number 5 came back, then 19, then 22. One by one, they rolled into the racks, locks clicking into place, no one touching them. I watched it happen. I stood outside in the cold and the fog and watched bikes return themselves. I didn't wait until 2. I grabbed my bag, left the IDs on the counter, locked the kiosk, and got in my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I looked back at the racks. All 6 bikes were there, locked in, wet and gleaming in the gray light. And standing on the tow path, maybe 30 feet past the kiosk, was a figure. Just standing there facing the canal, not moving. I couldn't see their face. They were wearing dark clothes, maybe a jacket, hands at their sides, and they didn't turn to look at me. They just stood there, still as a post, staring at the water. I drove away. I didn't go back. I texted my supervisor that night and said I was sick. Couldn't finish the week. She didn't argue. I don't know if she found someone else or if she just closed the kiosk early. I didn't ask. I still don't know who returned those bikes. I still don't know who was standing on the tow path. I think about it more than I should. Sometimes I wonder if that family ever came back, if they're still out there on the trail somewhere, riding in circles in the fog.